Hello everyone, my name's Matt, and inside of these boxes is a full $500 gaming setup from Temu, and for that price it not only includes a gaming PC, a monitor, and peripherals, but also includes stuff like an electric standing desk, an office chair, and a number of other accessories. And in today's video, I'm going to be unboxing all this stuff, putting together the setup, and telling you guys whether or not I think any of this stuff is worth it, and if it's worth it or not to buy setup tech from Temu. Also worth mentioning, this video is not sponsored, I didn't receive any of this stuff for free, and I'll be giving you guys my honest opinion on all of it. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the video. So the first thing I decided to open up and put together was the motorized standing desk, which after a coupon discount was only around $54, which seems incredibly low, but I was ready to find out how good or bad it is. Assembly was pretty quick, only taking about 15 minutes, which was definitely aided by using a drill with an Allen bit. Part of the cost savings does come from the fact the desktop itself comes in two separate pieces, which I'm not a huge fan of. After fixing a small mistake on my end and then installing the controller and accessories, I had a fully functional 2-foot by 4-foot standing desk that went way higher than I expected it to, and here were my first impressions. Honestly, first impressions on this desk is that it is surprisingly okay. It's pretty darn sturdy with a full metal base, and it goes up and down just fine, even though it is a little bit slow. But again, this is a 2-foot by 4-foot standing desk, electric motorized for under $60. So the fact it works at all is pretty surprising, but we will see if it gets bogged down once we have an entire setup on this thing. With the standing desk together, I decided to go ahead and put together the office chair as well. This chair ended up being a little under $38 after coupon, and it honestly didn't seem like an entire office chair could fit inside a box this size, but pulling all the parts out definitely proved me wrong. Putting this together was pretty simple and only took about 10 minutes, even with me making a mistake and correcting said mistake, and here are my first impressions. So first impressions, this chair seems a little small. It's somewhat comfortable, but I'm not sure how it would feel over a long period of time. Also, there is not much in the way of ergonomic adjustments. I mean, there's pretty much zero ergonomic adjustments. The only real adjustment is up and down using the lever on the side. And other than that, in the flip up arms, there really isn't a ton that you can adjust on this chair. So I guess we'll see how it is during a long gaming session. So now that the desk and chair were all put together, it was time to start loading up the desk with a bunch of Temu tech, starting with the gaming PC. This ended up costing me about $272 after discount, and I actually made an entire video about this PC, which I'll link in the description below. With that being said, I'll give you a quick rundown on the hardware inside, and we'll talk about performance more towards the end of the video. For a CPU, this system's using a pretty old i5-2637V3, which is an Intel Xeon processor with 4 cores and 8 threads and decent turbo speeds. This is an alright budget gaming CPU, but the fact it is 10 years old is cause for slight concern. Paired with this i5 Xeon is a basic X99 motherboard along with a single 16GB stick of DDR4 memory, a generic 512GB SATA SSD, and an AMD RX 588GB for the graphics card. These core parts, along with an unbranded 500-watt power supply and an RGB tempered glass case, make for a decent budget gaming PC at a somewhat reasonable price. The next thing I unboxed and set up was the XL desk mat that has this wave design on it. This came pretty crumpled up, but ended up flattening out well, and while it does feel slightly thin and cheap, for around $9 it fills up a lot of the desk, hiding the seam pretty well, which is great, and it both looks and performs acceptably. Moving on to the monitor, I ended up snagging this 24-inch Xiaomi monitor, rocking an IPS panel and a 100Hz refresh rate for under $60 after discount, which seemed like a pretty good deal. Getting it out of the box and setting it up was easy, and honestly I really like the design of this monitor, with it being relatively slim and having this cool stand design along with a VESA mount at the back. But until I get everything set up later in the video and test this guy out in gaming, I can't make any definitive statements on it just yet. Next came the mouse, which is this Attack Shark R1 in white, which came in at about $18 after discount. This is a tri-mode mouse, being able to connect through USB, Bluetooth, and 2.4 GHz using a dongle that's very nicely stored inside of the mouse itself. It's relatively light at 64 grams, and ergonomically it felt subjectively good as well. It glides smoothly and the buttons are very responsive and tactile. If this mouse tracks well, then it might be a great budget wireless gaming mouse. For the keyboard, I got an Ajaz AK820 for about 28 bucks after discount. I wasn't sure what to expect out of a mechanical keyboard this cheap, but boy was I surprised. This is a 75% keyboard with a knob, and while it is all plastic, it does feel surprisingly sturdy. It's using double shot PBT keycaps and these relatively lightweight linear switches that are called sea salt purples. These are pre-lubricated and feel pretty smooth. The biggest thing that shocked me about this board on first look is the sound. Just listen to this. That sound on a stock keyboard that I paid under $30 for is pretty darn good, and if it works as intended, this will be a great budget mechanical keyboard. Moving on to my first audio option, I got this soundbar for under $10. I'm not sure if it'll perform any good, but it's relatively compact and features hardware controls for power, LED lighting, and volume control. I decided to place this right under the monitor as it seemed like the best spot, even though the angle it's firing at is far from ideal. Next is this 1080p webcam, which looks very generic. With that being said, it easily sets on top of the monitor and has a nice ball head to swivel it in any direction you need, and for around $6, as long as the picture quality isn't horrible, then this may get my recommendation. Moving on to the next item, which is the desk lamp that I don't remember why I bought. It's a foldable unit with 3 levels of brightness and a ledge meant to hold up your phone, which is actually pretty nice. Also, with a cost of under $5, this little lamp seems like an okay value on first look. Now let's talk about the second form of audio I went with, which is this RGB headset coming in at under $14. I'm definitely worried about how the built-in headphones and microphone are going to sound, but it feels relatively well built and has built-in RGB for you RGB lovers out there. Also, this headset hangs nicely on the desk using the built-in headphone hanger. Now for the final 2 items of this Temu gaming setup, which number 1 is this metal cable management shelf for around $12 that was super easy to put together and clamps on the back of your desk to hold stuff like the final item, which is a power strip that cost under $8. This guy has 5 standard power inputs along with 2 USB-A's and 1 USB-C charging port. With all those items in, it's time to hook everything up, try out the whole setup for a bit, and give you my more finalized thoughts on each item and how they all work together. Getting everything hooked up was super simple, and the cable management shelf actually did a good job of doing basic cable management with very little effort. So what is it like to use this setup? Well, honestly, it's not too bad at all. Everything works as intended. Gaming on this setup is a decent experience, especially in esports titles. With that being said, some of these items are definitely wins and others are definitely fails. Starting back off with the desk, this is honestly a win in my book. For the around $54 I paid, I think this is honestly a good deal for someone wanting to try out a standing desk. It's relatively sturdy, goes up and down with the full setup on it just fine, and the size is perfect for a single monitor gaming setup like this, and you could definitely support a dual monitor setup if you were to use a monitor arm. While I don't know how this will hold up long term, I can recommend it to someone wanting to try out a standing desk without having to spend a few $100. As for the desk chair, this is going to be the first fail of the video. I'm about 5'8" and overall just not a very big person, but even for me this chair is a little too small. This combined with no real ergonomic adjustments and a somewhat uncomfortable sitting experience means I cannot recommend it. Even if you have a low budget for an office chair, I still think you're best off going into an office supply store like Office Depot and trying out chairs to see which one feels the best to you. For the desk mat, it's fine. I don't know how durable it will be over a long period of time, but for under $10, I think it's an okay value per dollar. With that being said, I think whether or not it's worth it is going to come down to if you like the design or not. Moving on to the mouse, honestly, for someone who doesn't play any competitive shooters, this mouse works fine for casual gaming. If you're on a tight budget for under $20, this is a good deal in my opinion. With that being said, if you can save up another 20 bucks, I would definitely recommend doing so and just get a Logitech G305, which has been my mouse of choice for over half a decade now. In terms of the keyboard, I think this is an absolute win. For the under $30 I paid, this is an incredible board. It looks great, it feels good to type on, and the sound it produces is solid, and it even has nice looking RGB lighting. The double shot PBT keycaps feel high quality, the switches are smooth, and having a physical knob to adjust volume on the fly along with pause and play is great. Is this board perfect? Absolutely not. The gasket performance is uneven, and the spacebar is a little loud compared to the rest of the keys, but again, for around $30, this is an absolute steal in my opinion, and I'll have this along with everything else linked in the description below. For the gaming PC itself, even at the discounted price of $277, this is still somewhat hard to recommend. It plays games like Valorant, Rainbow Six, and Apex Legends all at above 120 FPS average, and can give somewhat playable experiences in games like Elden Ring, Minecraft, and Cyberpunk if you're willing to crank down the settings way down. I personally think you're better off saving a little more money and building your own system, but I also wouldn't knock anyone for buying this either. With all that being said, if you want to see more about this system, I'll leave a link to my full video about it in the description below. Next up, let's talk about this Xiaomi monitor. For under $60 after discount, this monitor is an absolute win. 24 inches at 1080p is a good size, and a 100Hz refresh rate is solid for a budget gaming setup, but not ideal if you want to play stuff like Valorant competitively. This display gets relatively bright, and while I'm not able to measure them, the colors look subjectively pretty good. This, along with the solid viewing angles, are likely due to this being an IPS panel. The stand only gives you forward and back tilt, but the VESA mount at the back means you can attach it to a monitor arm in the future, and honestly, the main thing this setup is missing is a monitor arm, which would have been especially nice in the standing position for optimal ergonomics. Moving on to the webcam, this little guy, even taking into consideration the $6 that I paid for it, is pretty darn bad. It looks like a very cheap laptop webcam, but I guess if all you need it for is to use it occasionally with your PC, then some people may consider worth it, but for me, it's a fail. The desk lamp is kinda nice at around $5 as it has 3 brightness settings and provides a convenient way to prop up your phone. I will say this is worth it if you need a desk lamp and are on a tight budget. Next up is our 2 audio options. The $10-ish soundbar sounds like a $10-ish soundbar. It's not offensively bad for casual listening, but it's far from what I consider good. It sounds like a cheap generic Bluetooth speaker, which for a lot of people is perfectly acceptable, but for me, I think I'd rather use this money somewhere else in the setup. As for the headset, it's moderately comfortable, but the clamping force does start to get a little annoying after a while. The RGB on this headset is definitely not for me, but I know some of you will love it, and as for audio quality, it sounds solid for only being $14. It's not great, but also not awful in my opinion. As for the microphone quality, I'll let you listen for yourself. 1 2 3 test 1 2 3. This is going to be a test of the internal microphone on this headset. I may adjust the gain in my video editing software, but I'm going to leave it unprocessed so you guys can decide for yourself whether or not you think this sounds good or not. Finally, the last 2 items are the cable management shelf and the power strip. I think the shelf is a little pricey at the $12 that I paid for it, especially considering how small it is, and I don't think I can recommend the power strip as well. It hasn't blown up. I have no way of testing its quality. Overall, I think there's a lot of solid deals on Temu and a lot of e-waste and junk as well, but I'm interested to hear what you guys think of this Temu gaming setup and the individual components in the comments below. Also, as a disclaimer, Temu is definitely a shady and ethically questionable company, but so is Amazon, which myself and I'm sure tons of you use on a regular basis. With that being said, I'll leave some articles with allegations and investigations into Temu and their ethics in the description for you to check out. So yeah guys, I think it's time to wrap this video up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And as always, this is Matt from Tech by Matt, signing out.